And good morrow. All right, morrow. Yes, today, the day. We've had some exciting news lately. I'm not one who does videos, I think, that are the flavour of the moment videos. But this one has been playing on my mind for a while. I've been wanting to do it. I've been wanting to do it so much. But instead of doing it properly, right? I'm not doing it properly. I've had a couple of coffees. I haven't written very good notes. Haven't sorted them out in a way that will make a good, strong pitch. This isn't a negativity video. Right? I want people to know that. This is not a negativity video. It's not the aim of this video. Sounds like a bit of a bait heading there, doesn't it? Oh my lord, it's up to the 1 minute mark. That's what I lock customers in. Look my viewers in. You're not a customer. I'm not trying to sledge anything off you. It's not even a forewarning video, arguably. I just want to address a few things regarding Starfield. Okay. I want to begin by saying I love Bethesda products. I have, for a very long time. I had a stepdad that got me onto Rene back in the 90s. And I really appreciated his input because he got me off Phantasy Star on the Sega Master System, on the Dungeon Master on the Atari ST. And of course that was the paving of the way to Eye of the Beholder and things like Lands of Lore and the evolution of gaming. So by the time Redguard came along with procedurally generated worlds, where your save file actually got larger than the game install itself over time. The problem with procedural generation is that you can have issues. It's not perfectly fine. But I don't even care to bring that into the concept of me talking about Starfield, because what I have to say about Starfield is it's in two parts. One will be redressing aspects of what Bethesda do when making games. But my overarching aspects of this video will be Microsoft as a business structure, and obviously being ruled by shareholders and the way business operates because of that, when you've got to drive profit. We can all argue that every business needs to drive profit, and that underhanded tactics and whatnot, that's just all part of the course. Of course it isn't. It is not at all. Some businesses operate very ethically, and when you have to operate unethically, right? When word comes from above, you've got to do certain things so that your game doesn't work so well on one platform or another. That can be really frustrating to engineers and developers, software developers who are trying to make, out of passion, out of love for their product, want to do the best. And they certainly want to do the best by everyone. If you're a creative, you're generally aligned with raising the energy of humanity, right? That's the sort of thing you want to do. You want to give feedback. You want to boost the inspiration. You want to make the world be a wonderful place. And I do think many in games development get in for that reason. They want to do something where they can be passionate during their work hours and day, and they can use all their intelligence and their creativity in there, and they can turn it and churn it out into something good. Now, look, anyone seeing the screen, look, it is a bait switch screen, I guess, a clickbait screen, if you will. I gather there'll be a thumbnail for my YouTube video. It really is just a bit of a rant and rave here. I'll try to keep it very short and succinct. For me, 30 minutes is probably short and succinct. Try. Good luck. We're not King Thrash Gaming here. I'm not going to go for a 5-hour podcast or something, although I do find them very entertaining. Look, I have been a game tester. I've had NDAs. I do not have access to Starfield. I have not played Starfield. Okay, so let's just qualify. Anyone who wants to be negative about my video because they feel that they've got a video game war between consoles going on or something, right, this is not your channel. Okay, move along. Okay, I encourage people to play on Nintendo Switch if they need to. In fact, I'd probably hierarchically put it above the other gaming platforms for a myriad of reasons, but mostly because of Nintendo ethics and looking after the end user and customer. Just as a business being just about perfect. They gave lifetime warranties on Nintendo 64 controllers, things like that. I've always been pro-consumer. Just look at their network subscription for your family. You get 7 users on your annual license. It's just great value for money. Nintendo know what they're doing. They're looking after people. Not to say that Sony or Microsoft isn't, although a lot of this video is going to highlight, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now, I have been servicing and supporting Microsoft products going back to the early 90s, professionally. Prior to that, for many years, for my own interests, I'd been using Microsoft products, even before they were an operating system, although arguably MS-DOS, it was PC-DOS, MS-DOS, Microsoft-DOS. Yeah, those tools are still out there. They've never been a good product. They've never had any competitor's product or Microsoft product is generally the product you want to go with. Right? But that's as someone who's done professional support via call centers and whatnot. And who's arguably been trained to work in call centers at the level that Microsoft operatives are. They use a company called Teletech. I've worked for Teletech. I've been a very pro agent for Teletech. In fact, Teletech had a national web page dedicated to me. That's so good at 100% quality assurance every time. Like 140 in a row or something. Oh, it's just amazing. But look, the nature of what happens when business comes to gaming. Oh my lord. Okay, so Microsoft has done some pretty horrible things to gaming since about the last decade in particular. Okay, things have gotten bad. Now, if we go back a couple of decades, right, we could say that Halo, right, made by the people, Bungie, who made Marathon, right, the Apple ecosystem that was the competition to PC ecosystem, right, Bungie was going to be a killer product. Finally, Apple was going to have a game, a crown jewel and their cap for like gaming on Apple. Marathon was brilliant. I think it had the rocket jump before Doom had the rocket jump. So Halo, well, I was looking at screenshots of Halo before it came out on any platform. It was just like, it was going to be a PC game. It's going to be great. Same with Fable. Microsoft just went, I want to spend money. We'll buy software for our console. And that's why you have first-party studios, right? Say you've got software for release on your console, right? That is killer, right? If you've got software for the release on your console, people might just buy that console. It was an absolute fortuitous lining up of the constellations when Oblivion, made by Bethesda, Elder Scrolls 4, possibly back then. Yeah, 3 was Morrowind, 4 was Oblivion. To have that in a launch window, right? RPGs take years of development time, years of play testing, years of, there's so much more in the world. If you play a 7-hour corridor shooter, you can play test the hell out of that in a couple of 100 hours. You could have literally walked through every single playthrough. Like, this time I'm only going to walk through looking to the southeast. Oh, I found clipping textures over there, right? If you've got a small game, you can play test every aspect of it. If you've got a large game with the ability for multiple pathways through it, you need the general public to play test it. We know this. We've seen, Skyrim community patches were what made that game good. When the game Skyrim came to Nintendo Switch, like a decade later, it had a floating house. Had day one issues on PC. Oh dear. I think I had day one issues on PC with, what was it? Skyrim? I think it was Skyrim. No, it might have been Oblivion. Skyrim. I think it was Skyrim. There was a sound bug. I booked the day off work. When I was applying for a new job, in the interview, they said, anything you want to chat with us about? I said, on the 11th. Yeah, it would have been Skyrim. I want the day off. And the boss was like 7 months away or something. The boss was looking at me going, that's a weird request. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm pretty serious about getting that day off. Though. And lo and behold, the day before the 11th, I think he had a sick worker. He called me. He said, I'm going to need you in on that day. And mate, I would have been in there on that day if I hadn't been up since midnight the night before. The moment I could start downloading the game and playing it, I did. I was using a mobile phone for data, and I managed to get it up and running. I actually ran out of data right before I got I think it was a day one patch. I needed to get a driver update patch. I needed to get a Windows DirectX patch. There might have been a system update, but I think there was like a trifecta of things I had to download, and I actually ran out of data before I'd got them all. I couldn't get the game to start. It just kept dropping back to desktop. And it was just an issue that it wasn't until midday the next day. And I fell asleep about 6 a.m. after 6 hours of troubleshooting my PC. And as an engineer and a tech since, it is in the 90s, I've seldom come across a PC issue I couldn't get around without a net guide. I don't use net guides. I just brainstorm away myself. That's just, I understand the underlying, issues and what might be causing to them. And I generally, I can usually figure it out. And I've been in the habit of giving support to Microsoft software titles a lot because nobody else seems to know what they're doing. And I've been banned from the Microsoft forums for 245 years for getting gamers up and running on PC on Forza Horizon 3. They didn't want that. Too many gamers were moving over to Xbox if the game was jank on PC. And they no. If they make the game jank enough on PC, people will buy an Xbox because it just works. But sorry, I'm getting a bit sidetracked there. Too much coffee. Look, I think it's really important to qualify. I love Bethesda products. I mean, I just want to take that back step and just say that is number one. But in terms of what happens when business gets involved in gaming, dirty things happen. Halo, when it came to PC, was never any good. Fable never ever got reintroduced. The stuff that was reliant on having more memory in the system. Pathways you walk through a forest and grass wearing down, and damage to a tree just being there while the tree ages. All that stuff. Peter Molyneux, everyone says he talks up a good game and doesn't deliver. He did get acquired by Microsoft. There seems to be a requisite with all developers who work for Microsoft that you cannot give a better PC version. And not even for Microsoft. If you want to release games on their platform, it would seem that you're not allowed to have a better version of the software existing on PC. Right? So we know this. And Forza Horizon 3 is a really good example. Right? It would optimize itself every time you turn the thing on. Not every time, sorry. No. If there'd been a system update, if there'd been a DirectX update, if there'd been a driver update, if there'd been a game update, right? All things that Microsoft can force, and they did. They alternated between those four. Heck, we had an update to DirectX that swapped Gear 1 and Gear 6 on manual gear shifter on PC wheels, right? They did every little trick under the sun, and just by updating one of those four things constantly every time you turn the game on, it would do this 10-minute long process of optimizing for PC, and then it would set lower settings than you had set, and it would lock it to 30 frames, and it would basically give you console parity. And even when they finally got the Scorpio hardware, which became the Xbox, what was the original Xbox One X, once the team, Turn 10, had access to that hardware, they actually re-engineered the PC software with lower draw distances, equal to what the Xbox One X would eventually be able to do when it came to market, right? So Microsoft will not let a PC, they don't want PC games to in any way be better than the console. And that takes a lot of effort to make hardware that's like 8 times more powerful, not, render one frame better or one iota better than a potato-powered, built for budget-conscious gamers. I'm not picking on console gaming. I think console gaming is fantastic. It's what the lion's share of the world will use to get access to entertainment. We need good console games, and obviously games are developed for consoles. So look, I don't want to sound derogatory of consoles. As a person who's always serviced and built high-end PCs and often run multiple video cards that always push the cutting edge, I have found that as of that first Xbox coming to market and the Enforce chipset allowing Dolby Digital encoding, right, PC sound cards buried overnight Vista, like no backwards compatibility through the hardware abstraction layer for old sound cards. It was easily circumvented. Daniel K got stuff up and running. We had environmental audio extensions again, but we'd lost Oriole 3D permanently, which is the best sound setup ever until Tempest Audio on PlayStation 5 came about. But the sound in consoles, that's a different thing. The gimping that came, getting in mediocre performance to PC, gimping, was huge, right? And so it started with the Xbox. It started with, look back then, all the game optimization started with resolutions that the Xbox would do, which was about 720, and all of a sudden all our PC titles just had big, clunky, horrible graphics, right? PC gamers hadn't been at 720 res for about 8 years at that point, or more, and so all of a sudden all these PC games having menus and giant buttons and stuff that just wasn't not built for a mouse interface. And Microsoft would often hand the conversions of the PC platform over to teams that were notorious for building the worst interface and the worst control mappings and buttons. And I won't give the names of those companies that always churned out 6 out of 10 rated games. And generally the game would be perfect, but the interface would be crap. So the menus would just get in your way, and it would just be like, man, 10 minutes of polish, this game could be 2 points better in review scores by average. And it just was pretty magic when every time Microsoft was getting their multiple platform releases lined up, they would handle the PC version of the software over to teams who were notorious for making software of a lower caliber, of a lower quality, certainly when it came to review scoring. And it was just a case of, isn't it just great that it just works on the console? It's the platform it's designed for. Yeah, so we know Starfield has been designed for console. We know Starfield is going to be needed to recoup well more than $100 billion, right? And it's not just on one title. It's got time to recoup that money. It doesn't have to recoup it in the first week with the software coming out. I say $100 billion. People are shaking their heads, go, no, dude, you don't know anything. The acquisition was only $67 billion for Bethesda, and they get a whole bunch of IPs, and they've already been making money off it, and they've already made console sales off it. You can say to me what your perspective and your limited view on that subject is. Okay, I have a limited perspective and a limited view on that subject too, but I know basic enough about business. I've set up a few businesses. I know enough about business to know that if that capital had been available to that business over the last decade in other aspects, like they pulled it from other divisions of their business that actually make a profit. Things like Microsoft Excel, the team there, they've never been given money to refine their products, even though they ask for it. Microsoft takes it, even though that was one of the number one business wings for Microsoft for such a large amount of time in terms of pulling money into the company. Microsoft wouldn't authorise those guys to have the budgets they wanted to do the things they wanted, right? So yeah, they're pretty tight with their money when it needs to be. They know how that money in the marketplace playing for you. You know, money makes money, and that $67 billion stolen from other wings of the business. Right? And other businesses don't have that luxury. Stolen from other wings of the business they know that if they can get enough Xboxes in everyone's houses, they'll eventually get that money back. Right? So if they'd had that money available to them, they would have been able to turn profit on that money several times over. And so you could say, that $100 billion. I don't give that number based just off the Bethesda acquisition. There's a lot of money bringing hardware to market. There's a lot of money that you lose on network on network, like Azure network maintenance and stuff. The Azure network, when it came out, that was when Xbox Live kind of happened in the 90s. It was a case of, Microsoft's business division is going to offset the costs by putting it on gamers and charging for Xbox Live Gold and making it so the gamers keep the upkeep of those the server farms all running fine. So look, that money, $100 billion, that number doesn't mean anything. It's just it's just the concept. Right, there's a lot of money that Microsoft need to get back. They've been taking a loss for a very long time. Right, there was a strategy with Games Pass. The Games Pass strategy ultimately was to get gamers on console. Right? Microsoft do not make money in a PC ecosystem. Right? Somebody's been arguing with me the last 24 hours, saying, "Oh yeah, if you don't think selling Windows license keys isn't making them money, you're an idiot. You don't know anything." Okay, fine. We can say that. An operating system, you can't sell a computer without an operating system on it. Yes, Microsoft have notoriously made money for selling operating systems, but they actually make money selling training. There's a reason why their interfaces change every 6 months. Right? In their home territory, they make a lot of money off upskilling and training. So if you keep screwing around with how people can do things, if you remove all the shortcut keys people have used for decades, you can actually charge more money for training. Yeah, Microsoft don't care about end users. They'll take your money. Right? They're a great business. But they know how to. The only people Microsoft look after are shareholders. Right? So we need to understand that going in. That is the only people they will ever look out for. Their bottom line. You can say that's true of every business. Right? You can say that businesses only look after customers to keep the rapport and keep customers engaging with them so they can eventually make that money. But let's look at Games Pass. Right? Oh, sorry, the consoles. Okay, so PCs. Right? If you buy a game on PC, unless it was made by Microsoft or one of their first-party, the companies they own, they don't get any money for it. Right? If you buy a game on Steam, Microsoft don't get any money for it. If you buy a game on GOG or Epic, Good Old Games or Epic or one of the multiple game stores available on PC, right? Microsoft don't see any coin. But for every piece of software sold on an Xbox ecosystem, Microsoft gets some coin. If you buy a game controller on your PC, if it's not an Xbox authorized game, a licensed controller, right, Microsoft don't get any money for that. Right? So the PC ecosystem for hardware, you can run any steering wheel you want. You don't have to buy an authorized licensed peripheral to go with your PC. So Microsoft don't get any money on hardware sales in the PC sphere. They don't get annual network costs for you to access gaming, multiplayer online gaming in the PC sphere, unless for whatever reason you want an Xbox Live Gold subscription or whatever their current name for online gaming subscription annually is. Now in the console ecosystem, right, if you need to upgrade your solid state drive, they get money. Right, they've got a lockdown partnership where they've put the controller chip for the solid state drive built into the Xbox console, and therefore the solid state drives they sell you are the cheapest solid state drives ever made. Right, they're just the storage chips. There's no controller chip necessarily needed. That's why they're so small. They don't drop the price on them, though, do they? No, of course not. Of course not. Right? They're all about profit. They're going to make the money on those parts. Whereas, you could say that in other ecosystems, they're just open market. You can just put in any piece you want. If you can find it at a bargain price point at your local computer store, then go for it. I'm not going to argue the semantics of lockdown ecosystems and whatnot. Good on Microsoft for having a method to get some money back. They certainly need it. But, in an Xbox ecosystem, all software sold gets the money. all hardware sold. That's the money. People going online need an annual network subscription, right? That's the money. There's three strong pillars of income when you own the hardware platform that everyone is gaming on, right? So that is the attraction to owning hardware platforms. That's why Microsoft is willing to lose money on every original Xbox sold just to get them into people's houses. But 4 years prior to that, Microsoft had been quite candid to say that their future plans was to get a dumb computing terminal in everyone's houses and then basically rent people their software, right? And that's the model we saw by the mid-2010s, was that all the iPad software went from permanent lifetime ownership to annual subscriptions. And if you're the chief executive officer of a company like Microsoft, right, you get massive pay bonuses if you constantly show profit. The best way to constantly show profit when your products are all over the place. Like back then, Office releases might be every couple of years, and the Microsoft Office suite was one of their large income pillars. So if you were the chief executive officer of Microsoft in a year when an Office product didn't come out, you might not have the quarterly profits to show internal growth. So a great trick is to move everyone over to subscription models. It just ensures a certain amount of money is coming in. It also ensures you'll always just about have profit. It'll look like you're good. You're the good captain behind the wheel because it's always going up. The fact it's always going up is just that over time, more people buy into a platform. That's just growth, right? There's a growing number of consumers on the planet, we could say. Our population is going up. Our fiscals are going up. Ideally, as a human race, we are going forward in such a way that at times of peace, arguably, that we have this luxurious digital entertainment industry. You know, it's huge. It's great. So, Microsoft need gamers on console. I'm going to try and keep this video somewhat short. If you ever feel like I don't wind up a thought or a logic statement, sometimes in my notes after a video I just write the things that I missed out on. I've had too much coffee. I'm all over the place. I haven't even looked at my notes yet for this video, so probably could tie a few more things succinctly in on each of these little topics. I don't really care to do that. I don't want to be the be-all and end-all. I don't want to be a doomsayer when it comes to talking about Microsoft products. But I do feel that some of this information seems to be forgotten. Again, I reiterate back to those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Right, I've bought games on Xbox Live, games for gold or whatever it was. What do we have in the middle 2000s? You know, yeah, and I lost all those games when they shut that store down. I've got old versions of Crysis that I bought on disc that won't run on a modern version of Windows, so I can rebuy that software again. That's great. Yeah, annual subscriptions. Everyone wants to be on an annual subscription profit model. Gamers need to be on Xbox. Gamers need to be paying Games Pass. Gamers need to be paying annual network costs. Now, what was the Games Pass strategy? It's a strong strategy. It was ultimately to get gamers over onto Xbox consoles. So it was going to be a multi-step process. There was going to be 7 steps that we're going to need to line up for it to magically happen. And instead of me looking like an idiot and quoting what those 7 steps are and having people argue them with me individually, right? This Games Pass as a strategy has been playing out over a long time. But they've finally given up on it, right? About 3 months ago, executives at Microsoft are saying, oh yeah, look, we look like we've stagnated in our number of Games Pass installs. We're quite happy with where we're at with that. Or saying they're BSing like crazy. Basically, it didn't work out for them. They took a lot of losses. They damaged and deprecated a lot of things in order to try and make it happen, and it didn't pan out for them, right? So they've now given up on Games Pass, right? Head should be rolling. The amount of boardroom meetings where someone has convinced everyone going, look, we'll just lose money for another quarter because in the long run this will come good. And then here we are like many years later. And then now the executives are just like, oh yeah, Games Pass, you know, that's done its deal. That's good. Poor old boardroom members would just be like, they're all bald now. I've already pulled all their hair out. There's nothing left. There's no more pulling stuff out. There's a reason why people leave Microsoft ecosystems en masse, right? Most of them are just personal, right? It gets pretty uninspiring when you're asked to de-optimize your software for competing platforms and things that you're passionate about, right? But game developers don't want to be in that situation. Most of the Microsoft IPs, intellectual properties that they've bought, right? None of the original people who made the versions of the games that we associate with those softwares work for those studios anymore, right? The original Fable, is Peter Molyneux. Gone, you know. Bungie, they're over doing Destiny now. They've been acquired by a competitor's platform. And that was a nice little low blow. Oh, we're going for Call of Duty. Oh, okay, we'll take Halo back from you. It won't be Halo in name. The intellectual property won't be the same. But I'm playing a game right now which anyone looking at the graphics can probably go, oh, that looks a bit like Fallout. Yes, Obsidian. This is, it's not Fallout 1 or 2 based, I think. But look, it's got definite Fallout vibes. You can't not see it. Sure, they don't. Bethesda have the Fallout property. Let's see, Obsidian and Bethesda are under the same wing now. Arguably, they could do good things. But look, I'm tangenting. Games Pass. So, is Game Pass detrimental to the industry? Well, I mean, I could do a video on that. I've made comments about that in the past. I've been arguing with people at Eurogamer who are very pro Xbox, trying to tell me how wonderful it's going to be. Everyone likes to quote it as being like Netflix, and Netflix is profitable. No, Netflix, they just kept reinvesting their money into creating more media, right? They own a lot of media, sure. But, you know, Netflix and Games Pass are totally different. You can't compare. They're not the same industry. Totally different. So, as someone who's supported a lot of PC software titles since this 7-step process towards getting gamers onto Xbox begun, oh my lord, the underhanded tactics that Microsoft would be using to make a PC version of the software at parity to an Xbox. Now, Forza is a pretty good example. Now, I'm going to use Forza, and everyone can say, oh, but that's got no relevance to today. Well, it does, actually, because a lot of the Forza gimpings turned up again in Flight Simulator, and they keep turning up again and again and again across a range of Microsoft products. In fact, the reason I'm putting the software in front of us right now, out of Worlds, is having spent quite a few days trying to get this game to run stably. I've come to the conclusion that it's not my video card, it's not anything else. I've actually gone on the internet to look at the sorts of solutions that people are needing to do to stop this game from constantly dropping. And it's all the typical wonderful stuff, like you've got to run it as an admin. And for me, it was deleting shader cache, which reset my drops to desktop back to very, very quick, like constantly, very, very. Every time it was rebuilding a shader, it would drop back to desktop. And that made me realise that my initial instability was just me getting over the fact that each shader needed to be done. But after I cleared that shader cache, I got judders in the game frame rate, which I'd never had previous to that. My partner had watched me for a couple of days just grinning from ear to ear about how wonderful it is playing software that's just so responsive, like so smooth, so perfect, like great story, great everything, HDR graphics done right, all that sort of stuff. Great immersive role-playing, massive amounts of depth, incredible artificial intelligence regarding fights. I just love redoing a fight over and over and over again and watching how the AI will handle it in a plethora of ways. This here is an actual first-person shooter with role-playing elements that are just fantastic. This is the Outer Worlds. It's available now. It should be a fairly polished game, certainly on console. I highly recommend it. But, yeah, that's not the point of this video. But I do have it up on screen for the fact that it's a pretty good penultimate showcase of just what happens when a platform, which is Microsoft, that's the world's productivity platform, which was massively gimped to get gamers onto Xbox. Right? That should be illegal. Right? You can't own a newspaper, a radio station, and a TV network, and a blah 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 because you can leave. You can. In my country, certainly, you couldn't have too much media because it would allow you to alter elections. It would allow you to alter the mindset of the people if you were allowed too much control, right? And so there's a whole bunch of government processes that come and play. In fact, they make out in Starfield there's going to be all sorts of government and there's going to be all sorts of laws, right? Well, Microsoft operates outside those laws. I learnt that with the Internet Explorer versus Netscape Navigator argument. As long as you can argue really good in the court, the person overruling will say, look, I don't have enough IT knowledge. You both put up great arguments. I don't know. Right? Microsoft know that as long as you're ponying up enough money on a legal team, at the end of the day, you get a 50-50 outcome that might go in your favour, where you get all your legal costs back potentially. But even if you don't win, the amount of money you make by doing the unethical process actually makes you more profit than the little fine that's handed to you down the track. And plus having capital to operate with for however much time until that fine is handed down to you, you're still profiting, even if you had to break even technically. So Microsoft learned a long time ago they can use unethical if they want, and that will be profitable for them. And they've operated under that badge now for a very, very long time, right? And people just don't see it, but I've been in hardware channels where we sell hardware. And an example was when netbooks were all moving over to, not Chrome, but they're moving over to a version of Linux, essentially. the cheapest computers on the shelf, which had very little power draw in them, that they could be made super lightweight. And so one of the biggest things in terms of selling an expensive laptop was that miniaturization costs money. And so netbooks, when they came to market, they were amazing because they were tiny, they were lightweight, right? So a lot of people wanted to buy them. But in terms of making them cheap, what a lot of people were doing was to save paying $100 to Microsoft for an OS install. And I'm in Australia, so my price points are different to your country. But instead of paying $100 for an operating system, you can't sell computer hardware an operating system. A lot of these companies selling cheap netbooks just went, okay, we'll use a version of Linux. Well, Microsoft realised that if India and Africa and Russia and all these developing countries and China, where if you're in poverty or socioeconomic turbulence, you have this incredible IT industry, and everyone is determined, every man and their dog just want to learn IT because you're going to make money, right? So Microsoft knew with all these developing nations, and we're all going to cut their teeth on Linux. They were never going to move to a Windows operating system. You don't go from a stable, efficient and effective platform to one that's less. That you've got to spend more money on hardware just to get up and running, right? Nobody was ever going to do that. So Microsoft, realizing the biggest threat ever to their business, went, okay, we'll extend the life of Windows XP. We'll allow you to buy a $50 half-price Windows install for your netbooks. But we are going to force a couple of things. You are not allowed to sell netbooks with solid-state drives in them, right? The one thing that made them really good. You're not allowed to sell netbooks with more than 2 gig of RAM in them. In fact, ideally, we want them to only sell with 1 gig of RAM. Ideally, it's soldered to the motherboard and can't be upgraded, because they knew that Windows as a product got magically better when you had the 2 gig of RAM or more to run with, right? So they did a couple of things to force the hardware to be crap if you wanted a cheap version of an operating system to go on it, right? So I'm not going to say to you factually that Windows gaming software or gaming software isn't allowed to be enhanced on other platforms versus Xboxes. But it certainly seems that way. Somebody who's been a PC gamer for a very long time, I've watched the stuff get pulled out for parity with an Xbox. And Bard's Tale was a good example there. I think Microsoft had acquired In Exile before they'd done the polished version of Bard's Tale. The original version of Bard's Tale ran on multiple video cards and would have been one of those great titles. So it had incredible fidelity. It was one of the prettiest looking games ever. And in a slow-paced role-playing game, you don't mind if your frame rate drops down below 30 and whatnot. But it would have, over time, hardware would have gotten better. The game ultimately, in its beautiful looking version, would have been very renderable on later running modern hardware. But after In Exile, they made what they said was 10,000 changes to the software, and it was just basically pre-baking light sourcing. Everything was designed to get frame rates up. I had a friend with I think an Xbox Series X at the time. I went around and had a look at it on there. Actually, it might have been pre-Series X, actually. And I went around and had a look at the game running on their Xbox, and yeah, it dropped below 30 frames a second. But I had a Ninja PC with a couple of video cards in it, and the newly refined version didn't run on multiple video cards, not on one video card. The jank that software was, you could see it was no better than the Xbox version. Arguably, I might have had faster load times because I had a drive that was, at the time, was one of the fastest on the planet. So, yeah, there's a couple of things that might have been slightly better on a PC platform because I was brute forcing it. But ultimately, right, it was just a classic example of you can't have better looking version of the software on another platform. Now, only because that in parallel, by time frame, these things might not be lining up. You know, that's a little bit conspiracy theory in my own mind. I agree. If I was to assign a truth value to those statements, 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. So yeah, that's poor and weak speculation. And I'm probably using it to get my own little gas cloud here with a little bit more hot air in it. But apologies if I keep stopping the screen from spinning. I just think that the there is really pretty. I can't actually look around the screen because if it goes to redraw another shader, it just drops to desktop. So I walk a foot. I can leave the game running for 2 days if I don't move. If I move a step, it might just drop. Two days of running, it might drop. No other game, you know. Literally, it doesn't matter what settings I contribute. I can't get this game running, and it is Windows backend issues. It's purpose jank, and it came with the Space of Choice edition, which came after Microsoft acquisition of Obsidian. But we see after the Bethesda acquisition, Skyrim was running at 60 frames a second via a mod on the PlayStation, PS4 and PS4 Pro, and therefore PS5. And after the Bethesda acquisition, oh my lord, the new version of Skyrim, that was actually worse. Worse. And you were forced to it. You could no longer run the old version. Yeah, that's true on all platforms. SLI got removed. I think when you went to the map screen, there was a flicker if you had 2 video cards running. Crossfire, I think, was my case. I had a couple of Vegas at that time, maybe. I might have been on a RX 590. Oh, no, not RX 590, sorry. What was the NVIDIA 590? That's a long time ago. Probably not. By Skyrim. The re-release of that, yeah, it was probably 2 Vegas. But the problem was the rendering of the clouds when you went to the map screen would flicker. The same way as you had texture flicker in Dragon Age Origins. Battlefield 5, this is more the market trying to decimate dual card gaming, so probably not related to Microsoft, but also the video card companies. But look, we do see that there is market manipulations that go on. That's just standard business practice. But any software company that Microsoft's acquired, magically put out a software version on PC, usually an update to an old platform that's never been updated to just magically break it. I know Forza Horizon 3, the last patch we got, pulled out, broke the game on PC, essentially. Really made it a lot worse. And Microsoft was happy enough to turn around and say, oh no, we're done updating that game now. Enjoy your, we accidentally with that last patch broke the game, basically screwed it over for you, but yeah, that's okay. We're done updating it now. Enjoy your broken PC version, but you own the game on Xbox. Go buy an Xbox, it'll just work. But yonks later, they upgraded the game again. They pulled out all the reasons I bought the game. I'm an Australian. I bought the game because it was set in Australia. It had it's set in an area where I lived for a lot of my life, and cars in the game that I actually had access to in life. I've done a Forza tuning video, I think, where I was driving a car I used to own all around the zone I used to live in. Yeah, it was fantastic. I used to love that game. But they pulled out all the Australia posts, which is our postal network. They pulled out the post boxes. They pulled out Telstra as our phone company. They pulled out all the Telstra phone booths. They pulled out all the things that made it iconically Australian. You could say, they lost license access to those things. It's like, well, no, when I bought the game, software I bought, right, in my country, the ACCC, there's a consumer legislation provision that look after my rights. Right, the product I bought, right, got switched to something which I wouldn't have bought down the track. Right, I should be able to demand a refund. Microsoft don't care. They'd happily refund me. They stopped selling Forza Horizon 3. They don't want to sell that game anymore. But ultimately, I could never buy that game for PC. I had to buy it for Xbox. And in the forums for Forza, everyone was constantly complaining. So it ran like shit. And I'll talk about some of those reasons around about now as to how they decimate software on one platform to make it run well on another, or make paltry-looking hardware look equal to high-end stuff. But everyone in the Forza forums, when they were pulling their hair out trying to make that game work, about 1 in 5 comments was like, I'm just going to go buy an Xbox. It just works. Right, so Microsoft have learned, right, if you make the PC version janky enough, gamers will move en masse to Xbox. Now, we know the software has just gone gold. Now, it has to go gold. They need to get those discs pressed. They need to get them into retail stores. They need to get them on shelves. That is, they've paid a lot of billions of dollars, right, for a crown jewel to lure people into their camp. Nobody that'll be the new Elder Scrolls game, but Starfield's the step up to that. It's the in-between. Some people prefer their RPGs to be sci-fi based, and Starfield's always meant to amalgamate the two products that they had, the Elder Scrolls series and the Fallout series, so that either or gamer could maintain one product. I think was the basis that they wanted to do. But they dropped all conversations about the fact that it was meant to amalgamate both those products many, many years ago. So, yeah, whatever. Forza gimpings. Oh, man, everyone was going, I'm just going to get an Xbox. It worked. They sold product. How did they gimp that game? Oh, well, it's all the sorts of stuff they're doing right now. Sorry, the game's gone gold. You can download it a couple of weeks earlier on Xbox. I mean, these are all marketing things that will allow people to go out and get an Xbox. If you buy the ultimate version of it, you can play it a couple of days early. Well, you get the pre-download on Steam a day before you can basically play it on PC if you buy the ultimate version. Well, not everybody have bandwidth on their internet to download 160 gig or whatever the PC version is overnight. So they know that it's going gold and being pre-downloaded on Xbox a little bit earlier is going to do them well. Maybe the PC version is only on their store. Maybe they want their network bandwidth to be available to Xbox gamers to get that download done first. I don't know. There could be some legitimate reasons. I'd like to sit on the fence or not be so jaded. I'd like to just take that honest, down the middle viewpoint where I'm not biased and believe these things. So yeah, let's just believe that the Xbox pre-download is for legitimate reasons to help end users, but we know it's to sell Xboxes. Oh my lord. Xbox. Yeah, Forza. What was the biggest gimping in that game was not being able to drive at 60 frames a second smooth. Now, this does not matter to a slow-paced game like, oh, well, that's the one we're looking at right now, Outer Worlds. But I can confirm that when I could play this game and it was the smoothest gaming experience with the least latency of all my games on my PC, I'm sitting there going, man, this is just bliss to play. But after I cleared out my shader cache, which fixed the issue, I could actually play the game for large amounts of time once the shaders in any given area are built. I have this jank now. It's like, wow, new jank, new little judder. And it's like, it's taken all the joy out. I actually said last night I was going to bed, I'm going to start playing this game. It gets me too angry. It doesn't. If it only crashes twice in an hour, it's good enough for me. I'll keep playing. Save often. It's a great game. But it's fair to say none of my other games crash to desktop. None. Right? Even ones that are highly janky for other people. Yeah, I don't. I've got some of the most reliable hardware you can buy on the planet. Like 600 watt power supply, 600 watt scientific grade motherboard. Just stuff that makes it untouchable. Actually, I don't think I'm using a motherboard on this machine at the moment. But that's my B machine. It's currently on the floor, not working. That's just how reliable it is. No. It's just I think I've got to redo the thermal paste on that one. Yeah, that's just me raving. Don't worry about it. But the depths of jank that you can introduce on a platform. So Forza, not being able to do 60 frames a second. If you're driving down the highway at 200 mile an hour, so there's a number for other countries. For me, I'd say kilometres an hour. I set all my games to European settings. If you're going down the road 200 kilometres an hour and there's any frame rate hitching at all, right, that breaks immersion 100%. And they were very clever at introducing frame rate hitching in that game. Now, when you looked at what the CPU was doing, you could see that it didn't matter if you had 4 cores or 8 cores or 6 cores. One core was being flogged out so heavily, and all the other cores weren't doing very much. Now, it is true the game ultimately became multi-core. The game became multi-core when, as I said, Turn 10 got access to the Scorpio, the Xbox One X hardware, and then they finally made the game multi-core. But at that point, they gimped the PC version in serious ways. It didn't matter that you finally had frame rate. The graphics quality had come down so much. The draw distances had come down. It had been hurt. It was no longer the good game it was previous to that, right? But prior to that, for the first huge amount of time after the game launched, like 8 months or something, it was very hard to get 60 frames a second. Now, I was able to do it. Right? A lot of people had frame rate lows of 47 in certain areas of Surface Paradise or certain areas of the game. And getting past those lows was really tricky. But I found ways to do it. And what it turned out it was, right, it's the Microsoft has destroyed. DirectX 12 isn't really DirectX 12. DirectX 12 was, Microsoft was fearful that competitors were going to go to other platforms. What was happening was that AMD was in all the consoles, and so the lion's share of software development is for AMD video chips right now. And Xbox in the gaming is such a small niche of the gaming market. It's huge. There's still a lot of millions of people doing it, sure. But if you look at how many, and you can say there's NVIDIA hardware to Switch, that's great for old games, great. But the lion's share of the platforms that are selling, right, it's over 100 million PS4s in the wild. There's more than 40 million PS5s in the wild. These are AMD chipsets, right? And one stable hardware platform to develop for, 2 arguably in that case, 3 if you include the PS4 Pro. But there's also Xboxes that are based on AMD hardware, the Xbox family going back a couple of gen. So AMD is, if you're a developer and you're writing software, you are certainly writing it for support for the AMD chipset. And AMD had Vulkan, which was an application programming interface, which is the software that gives access to the hardware in your video card. It's a layer, if you wish. And the more to the metal that layer is, the more 100% access you get to the hardware chips, the more performance you can eke out on said hardware. And so you want to use a hardware layer. We only found out around about DirectX 10 level that Microsoft's APIs were DirectX weren't very to the metal at all, right? It was just some marketing slide they put out. I think it was around DirectX 10 times saying, oh, this one's a lot more to the metal. It's like, oh, great. What have we been doing in the past? We've just been buying 50% faster video cards to get 10% more speed. Great. This is just not good. But there's always been reasons to use Glide, or there's always been reasons to use certain APIs. And Vulkan was going to be it. It was about to become the market leader. And the market couldn't have that for several reasons. One is that the reason why people game on Microsoft PCs is because of DirectX, right? If you weren't locked into DirectX, you could game over on Apple, or you could game over on Linux. And you can say there's older versions of DirectX on Linux, and DirectX 12 now has something. You look at the Apple news this year, they've got DirectX 12 in some form or another happening, which could be very interesting for the future of gaming. Haven't read much in that, but Microsoft. So what happened is there was about to be a to the metal API. AMD were about to own the market, and NVIDIA freaked out and went, "Shit, we need a to the metal API for PC gaming." And Microsoft saw both camps weaponizing and just went, "Holy shit, we're about to lose PC gaming sales, and therefore our GameStar strategy falls flat." But that's my own conspiracy theorem. But they knew that they needed to keep DirectX. They needed to keep PC gaming in DirectX, otherwise gamers could eventually move camp. And so what they did is they incorporated different pathways. They said DirectX, Vulkan can become the lion's share of what DirectX 12 is, but what we'll do is we'll take some code from NVIDIA. We'll make separate pathways. So if you're running an NVIDIA card, you just go down the NVIDIA pathway. If you're running AMD, you go down the AMD pathway. DirectX 12 in name only is one API. It isn't really. But all the features that were coming to DirectX 12, things like multi-GPU of different technologies being able to be done, right? All the stuff that would have benefited gamers, right? Every developer under the sun has just said, "Oh, we don't know what's going wrong with that." We reached out to Microsoft, and then all developers just go silent, right? Microsoft, for whatever reason, they just never get back. As someone that's tried to support computers all through that time, it's been a bit of a nightmare. But so DirectX 12, the feature that Microsoft love about DirectX 12, the feature they love using, right, is the ability to store all textures as one large texture file, right? So there are benefits to that. If you look at Gran Turismo 3, 5, I don't know, 6, 7, 5, 6, I don't know, whatever, GT Sport, sorry, I didn't have a number after it, that's why I was trying to think of it. GT on the PlayStation 4 had very long loading times, very, very long loading times, and was one of the few games that would benefit from a solid-state drive in the PlayStation 4. Now, the solid-state drive in the PS4, not the PS4 Pro, was very much limited by the bus speeds of the SATA bus. And so putting a solid-state drive in, it made things a little bit zippier, but you didn't get the real benefits of the solid-state drive. But the one title that made a massive difference I'd say Ni no Kuni, because battles were just quick. But Gran Turismo, the loading time dropped by more than a minute when you were loading levels. And the one-time solid-state drives don't get GIMPed on a slower base bus was when you're loading small files. Tiny little files like 4K files, 4 kilobyte files, really bog down the transport speed from solid-state drives. And the fact that Gran Turismo just sped up so massively on a solid-state drive with a massively capped bus tells us that they were using lots of little files. And when you go over to DirectX, right, if all your little individual textures are smallish files, or there's lots of them, your drive might get stuck having to move read heads all over the drive. They can't just read in one big linear read. There are massive benefits to the concept of one large texture file containing all of the graphics. And then you just inference or reference to coordinates or parts of that texture file to get the actual bit of the graphic texture you need to wrap onto a surface. So DirectX 12, one large texture file. Now, Microsoft have used that to their advantage to hold back frame rates on PC gaming very, very cleverly. So what they've done is they've tuned, using software, they can, or their own, you could say the firmware, but it's the operating system. The setup on the consoles, they've always leaned to giving their consoles 1 gigabyte of video RAM more than standard PCs have. So the Xbox One, when they started doing this with DirectX 12, the Xbox One, which ultimately became the Xbox One S, that's what we now call the Xbox One, it had 5 gig of VRAM. And this is a time in history where most video cards topped out at 3 or 4 gigabytes. And the Xbox One X had 9 gig of VRAM. And by that point, PC video cards had kind of upped their game to having just about 8 gig of VRAM consistently. So by making one large texture file a gigabyte bigger than what your video RAM is, means that they can introduce video RAM being filled, right? Which is one of the only times when you might lose like 30% frame rate, right? It'll lead to massive frame rate lows or holdbacks if your video RAM is absolutely maxed, right? You just don't ever want that to happen. And with Forza, they took it to the next level, right? What they did on Forza on PCs, to make a Ninja PC with massive amounts of CPU grunt more than an Xbox, and massive amounts of grunt more than what was in the console, to get it at parity, they took an incredible trick, which is make the texture file larger than anyone's got, and then encrypt it. Now, encryption, mathematically speaking, is one of the hardest functions for a modern computer to do. There's a reason why some companies run with dedicated hardware encryption chips. But to do decryption or encryption, decryption in our case, in software means relying on the CPU to perform decryption, which is a very math-heavy feature. So, okay, why? What's all this about? Well, if you put decryption on the same primary core, which is responsible for the game's minimum frame rate, you will hit one core being fully pegged out and bottlenecked, even if all your other cores are doing not very much. So consumers will go and they'll look at their CPU usage, which generally doesn't show all the individual cores. And it just shows, oh, you're only using 40% of your CPU on average, based across all the cores. But if you go in and look at them individually, if one of them's absolutely fully pegged out, and it is responsible for your minimum frame rate, then your frame rate is being held back by the performance of that core. And Forza was like the only game, of all the games I had at the time, I had a machine I was running at 5 gigahertz if I wanted via water cooling. And it was the only game that gave me frame rate benefits as I went up beyond. I think technically I had 2 games that benefited at 4.4 gigahertz, but generally at 4.2 gigahertz, all my games were at maximum frame rate. And for a couple of games, okay, there were frame rate lows that I could smooth out at 4.4 gigahertz. But Forza was like the only title I had that, even though it wasn't using 100% of my CPU, kept giving me better frame rate lows the higher and higher and higher I took it, all the way up to 4.8 gigahertz. It was still improving my frame rate lows to hit that magic 60. But I found the ultimate solution, right? And this is a bit crazy. Turned out Microsoft was using a texture file bigger than our VRAMs, quite sizably. And therefore our machines had to constantly decrypt information on the fly. And to get around that, what I did is I turned my page file on, even though I had 32 gig of RAM, or 16 gig of RAM I think at that stage, which was a lot more than the game needed. The console certainly didn't have anywhere near that. I had a video card with a ton of RAM on it. But I kept running out of VRAM. I kept running out of system RAM. My web browser would shut down if I ran the game. Or the game would shut down. No, I think it would shut my web browser down. Because I ran out of RAM. It would flash a giant warning on my screen the whole time I was playing to say low VRAM, even though I'd hit my VRAM and then it would just sit at that level the entire time. Like they took up 1/9 of my game screen with this giant red warning saying only on PC. They got rid of that after a patch fairly early in the game, but it was just clear. It was like, oh, punish PC gamers, make them hate the experience. Optimize the game every time they turn it on, and make that process take about 8-9 minutes. And overclocks will survive Intel burn test, and every other torture suite on your PC will trip up the most mild overclock coming into the game. But if you run the same overclock in the game or much, much higher, the game will run religiously for 5 days in a row, no issues, right? But they found all these ways that, like, it's just like, yeah, we don't want PC gamers to enjoy their rigs. We're going to make them suffer. Every time after it's finished optimizing the game, it would sit on the settings to lower and 30 frames a second. It's like, Yeah, as the IT person of the family, I couldn't hit the road and trust that my family would be able to boot that game up like 2 days in a row. No way. It would never happen. It would never happen. Oh, dear. So, yeah, lack of reliability, that's huge. But, yeah, using DirectX features. So that texture file is a way to hold back PC gaming, to really, really smash out much lower frame rates than PC hardware is capable of. And they're quite willing to do these tactics. Right? They are quite willing to ask their software development teams to de-optimize their software for one platform. Right, Turn 10, I think the people who actually were the ingenious people for Turn 10 who made the Xbox 360's triple-core processor really squeeze out some of the best physics any race game had ever experienced. Genius programmers. And they've been pulled in on projects to decimate other people's. They become Maverick games. I'd be very interested to see what Maverick are doing. There's one or two things. One is they've either jumped ship so they can finally make highly optimized software for platforms that will deliver what they can actually do. They are genius programmers. Or they're now going to be a consultation team for a whole bunch of conversions to PC from the Xbox platform, possibly, just to make sure that everyone can make either PlayStation software look bad versus the Xbox counterpart, or PC software look bad versus the versus the Xbox counterpart. Sorry. So yeah, watch that space. Whatever Maverick are doing, I'd be very, very interested in that. But look, a lot of games developers, they really lose passion for their projects when asked to do such horrible things. And I alluded before that a lot of these Microsoft IPs are no longer have the same key people who made the programs we absolutely love. So yeah, encrypting those texture files. Yeah, look, I came up with a trick. If you turned your page file on and made it massive, right? By this point, we'd all moved to solid-state drives. Many gamers had turned off their page files and made them fairly small, like enough for system error logs and stuff like you need to keep your machine running well. But yeah, the fact that making a massive page file, bigger than I'd ever used, if you started the game and then drove around for about an hour, after it actually decrypted all the textures once, the frame rate was just perfect, and the load on that primary CPU core just dropped right off. Right? It's pretty obvious what was going on to those who knew how to look and how to inspect. But yeah, there's some really genius stuff out there which the typical gamer will never figure out. The typical PC gamer shouldn't need as a hobby to have to learn how to really get in, to get in acceptable performance versus getting in mediocre performance that evil companies might attempt to do, gimping. So what are some other things that we typically see when trying to get one platform versus another? Oh, what's the classic one? Physics tied to the frame rate. Yeah, that one's been used time and time again. 30 frames per second on PC might just be forced, right? And that's an easy one. That's an easy one to do, right? And that's just like, oh, you're running the game at 75 frames a second. Okay, well, the birds in your sky are going to fly in a weird way, and they're going to have stutters and jank, or all the physics engines will break. There'll be rubber banding, or there'll be this, or there'll be that. Yeah, you can expect that one. That's a good one. But I don't know if they'll do that one. I'd like to think that the PC version will be at least allowed to hit 60 frames a second. But they probably want a lot of negative reviews on PC, so that and then positive reviews on Xbox, so that people just read the Metacritic or the summary score and go, ooh, it looks like the Xbox version is better. Right? They deduce based on inference that the console version will be better. HDR, yeah, you had HDR on the console. You had HDR in Forza. Isn't it the lower powered video chip of the Xbox? Even though HDR is meant to be an overhead to video rendering. HDR on the Xbox was a thing. Forza Horizon 3 on PC. HDR was not a thing. And HDR in a Windows environment is horrible. And we can argue that. I spent 3 hours last night reading Microsoft's evolution of the Windows desktop compiler, of how it handles HDR. And it is true, it's very tricky. If you've got standard dynamic range and high dynamic range content on one screen at the same time, there's a lot of work in the back end to be done. So there is floating point 16, so instead of being FP32, FP16 is good enough for 10 and 12-bit color. And it's very, very clever, actually, what they're doing in the desktop compiler to allow those two things to exist side by side. But HDR gaming on PC is a bit of a nightmare. If you've got an overlay up, your overlay might be in HDR. And again, there are slider bars. You can do things to match out HDR and get it set. But if you look at any forums or threads on HDR gaming in Windows, it's just like, oh yeah, learn your three-finger salute for turning HDR on and off, and learn to reload your game twice in a row to get the HDR to actually kick in. Yeah, when HDR gaming on consoles just works, it's just one of those little magic feathers in the cap. And when it's held back on PC, it's a bit of an issue. But I'd like to think that's just difficulties with the PC platform, multiple video cards and lots of drivers and who knows what. You know, but that's because that's the audio issue I had on day one with Skyrim. It was just because my sound was set to 24-bit audio output. Right? Never, ever in the history of gaming had I ever had setting my sound hardware to manual settings. Had never, ever, ever once caught me out. But on the launch of Skyrim, couldn't get the game started till midday the next day. And it was one of the few times I've ever had to get a solution to an actual problem that I couldn't sort out myself. It was one of the first times I had to admit defeat. And I went on the net and some genius somewhere on the planet and figured it out. It's like, man, if I just set to 16-bit, like I think it was 48 kilohertz possibly, whatever it was. I think it was either 16-bit or 24 down to 16, or it was 96 kilohertz down to 48 or something. And all of a sudden the game just magically started and worked. It's like, well, there's all sorts of stuff you can have happen. At the moment, it's the Atmos renderer. Microsoft partners, people like Samsung, you can take sound out of your Xbox Series X or Series S in Atmos and feed it through a Samsung TV into a Samsung soundbar via eARC. People claim there's no latency in that setup. And I think it's been tested and shown there's no latency in that setup. But everyone else has problems, right? But Samsung and Microsoft have a little partnership going on there, right? Yeah, so would Microsoft be so dodgy as to do stuff like that? I don't want to imply that. Oh, hang on, I just did. Anyway, audio issues on PC, yeah, potentially. We got that page file issue I was mentioning, and Core's been loaded down. I'm sliding down. I made some notes before this on a Note Samsung phone, actually, and I'm just going to slide down the page now. Just have a look. It's about 20 pages of notes here. I'll just have a look at some of the headlines I got. But yeah, they might enforce a low minimum frame rate through encrypted texture, brute force, making one CPU core overly loaded. There's a lot of things they could do to enforce a minimum frame rate on PC, like the physics engine, as I said. Optimizing for PC on Xbox on Forza. Oh man, that was brilliant, right? So that would take a long time, right? If I had 30 minutes of gaming time on a Saturday morning before I did my chores, I'd give myself 30 minutes to drive around in Forza. Well, I found consistently for months, week in, week out, that my 30 minutes of gaming time would be lost up to the 22-minute mark just trying to get the game started. Religiously, for months. I'm sorry if that's sacrilegious to the term religious. But, every single time it'd be optimizing for PC, and then I'd have to reset the settings and I'd have to restart it again at each one of those starts. And here was the thing, this is the reason I got banned from the Microsoft forums, was that they did a forced AMD driver update, which forced all of us AMD users back to a driver package that was about 6 months out of date. And it added a 10-minute load time before the game did anything, each time you started the game. And it was the first time a forum moderator had actually replied to anybody in the Forza threads. And they said, we've contacted AMD about this. Don't worry about it. About a month later, when the problem was still persisting, or 6 weeks later, and a bunch of us started saying, man, we're reaching out to AMD, and they're making out that they've never heard about this, right? What had happened in the forums is one user had found a way to basically take the driver numbers of the package that Microsoft was trying to downgrade us to and inject that into the latest drivers, and then stop Windows from trashing our games and actually remove that 10-minute load time. And because he made that post, right, that's reverse engineering software. For whatever reason, that was a reason for a forum ban. And I asked super politely of the mods, like, maybe that there was to support gamers, and it wasn't reverse engineering the game software itself, and it really is a positive for everyone here in the community. Perhaps that ban was a bit extreme. Because I was talking about other users getting banned, I got banned. Now, actually, in that post, I said, if this post is ban-worthy, you feel welcome to just edit out the 2 sentences in it that are, and just leave it up. And not only did they ban me, not only did they remove that post, they then banned my account based on that post. Now, I took a screen grab of that post. In fact, I should put it up on the screen right now. I'm sorry I haven't got it ready. It was a very polite, it's a very elegant post. It wasn't in any way negative. In fact, at this stage in history, I was still, as a public persona, being always super positive. I ran a PC business. I supported Microsoft products. I was always positive of them. I was one of those people who loved Win 10 up until launch. So it was great. It was one of the best products ever that Microsoft were putting out. And the release product was totally jank compared. But whatever. I bit by bit became more and more bitter. I actually ultimately shut down my business because of Win 10 being so anti-consumer and unethical. It was a product designed to create Xbox sales. It was horrible. Microsoft deprecating the world's productivity platform. And this gets back to the rant I might not have finished earlier, that businesses should not be allowed to own so many relevant industries that might impact each other, right? The fact that all the world's banking and art and actual creativity that people do on Microsoft Windows as a productivity platform, even if they might not be gamers, and the fact that Microsoft, in order to up number of perceived Xbox installs in the marketplace, if you were forced upgraded to Win 10, which accidentally happened many, many times for many people, and they'd just apologise, but what they would do is they would quote, because every Windows install was considered an Xbox license, and so to developers, trying to convince developers that they actually had a share of the market and that there might be consumers out there willing to purchase software in a Microsoft ecosystem, in an Xbox ecosystem, they kept doing these dodgy tactics of force upgrading Windows on people just to claim more Xboxes, right? Then people would revert back to the old Windows. And about 2 months later, they get forced another update. And to say that there was a fake number of Xbox installs, and I don't think Microsoft would have been statistically removing any of those numbers or altering those numbers back to the reality of, oh, that's the same user 5 times upgraded. That's not 6 Xbox licenses. No, that's one. Oh, no, that's 6. 6 more Xboxes. And was it things like deleting my, updating my Forza Horizon 3, 100 gigabytes plus, 3 times in a week, right? Forced updates each time, no backups. And that was Xbox Live contact hours, right? It was the one metric I was quoting the industry. This is actual Xbox being played. Yeah, right. Me downloading 300 gigabytes plus of Forza. It's me playing like a PC. No, it wasn't. But that loading screen, right? So 10 minutes of added time simply because of AMD drivers being forced to be out of date, and Microsoft actually pretending to lead the community. Oh yeah, no, we've communicated with AMD about that. Don't you worry, that'll get fixed. No, it didn't. It took a long time before that one got fixed. So, yeah, Microsoft have the trifecta on the PC platform. Trifecta, quadzilla. I don't know, quad. We've got system updates. Yeah, they do that. DirectX updates. They don't do that often, but they did with Forza. Game updates. Driver updates, which they can enforce. Yeah, the game on PC might be a nightmare. HDR on PC, yeah, it might be a nightmare. We saw with Bard's Tale, right? PCs, no, they're not allowed to be better than a console. So, not necessarily Bard's Tale, we've seen it with a ton of games. Yeah. They like PCs being held back. You think I'm being cynical? No. This software needs to seriously recoup a chunk of $100 billion. Right? If you think I'm a conspiracy theorist or that I'm, no. There's shareholders out there. These guys have been, right, for 10 years have just been going backwards, quarterly, right? This money needs to come. It came from other wings of the business. They could have been making a lot more profit if they had that cash flow at that time. They need to get money. So why would they spend all that money buying first-party companies? Don't get it. First parties, when you mention this, they're for one thing and one thing only, software on launch. If you have a platform, games will get made for it. Nintendo and Sony see that all the time. Each of them having more than 100 million hardware installs on current platforms. Well, I mean, PS4 Pro arguably have the lion's share of, if you put all the PlayStation's more recent platforms together, it's a very sizable number. It's probably 160, 170, 180 million, something. It's too silly for words. Combined with Nintendo, there's hundreds of millions of consoles. And companies know when they write software for those platforms that they will make software sales. So the reason you have first-party companies is that while you're developing hardware in secret, you can actually give the specs to some companies to get a leg up or a lead on the development to be ahead of the game, so that on launch day you've actually got some software to sell. Right? And anyone who looks at Sony first parties and go, oh, they're all story games, I'm not interested in them. Who cares? It's just a company that makes a few titles for the system. I mean, Sega was great when the Dreamcast came out. That game had AAA title in every type of genre: a sports, a fighting game, a race game, every type of game you might want. It had a AAA title, right? Sega hit it out of the park. It was great. It's first party titles went. They've done the job. And if you couldn't mod chip, well, if you couldn't mod a Dreamcast just using a bootloader off a CD without even using a chip, right? They close up overnight, because if you can't sell software, if you can't make the money off the platform that you're giving out there and possibly losing money on to put in people's houses, then there's no point sustaining it. And I think that's why we sort of lost the PlayStation Portable too, as it got hacked a little bit too early in its life, and people could just put memory cards in them and basically load up software. So these markets, they typically just leave the market when that happens. First party software, it's just for release titles. Starfield coming out this late in the console's existence, well, I hope it's really polished. I really, really believe it should be polished. There are all those people out there saying, oh, it was done as of last year. No, it's not Final Fantasy 16 or whatever that was. It really was pretty much done last year. This is Bethesda, man. They're still working on that game right now, like crazy. 24/7 as much as they can. If you think they're not, no, I generally believe at this point now it's gone gold, that people are going home for 3 days, enjoying time with their family. I really hope that. But look, the reality is we're going to get a day one patch. The reality is we're going to get more patches going forward. And, it's only gone gold, so it can be manufactured, released to manufacturer to have discs on shelves on release date. Let's see any reason it's gone gold. But yeah, Oblivion in that launch window on Xbox 360. Oh, gee, that was fortuitous. Okay, so install sizes. I'm a little bit concerned that the PC install is massively larger than the Xbox install. The lion's share, like 70% of a game's size in the modern world, can easily be in high quality audio. When there's such a difference between the PC and the console version, could that be ultra texture size that is just ridiculous? Yeah, I'll pretty much go with that one, thanks. And given the game on the Xbox Series X is meant to be running in 4K, it's fair to say that there is a 4K texture set in there, and if the Xbox Series S is running a 1440, there's probably also a 1440 texture set in there. Now, we know Microsoft make money on licensed peripherals. We know that making money on solid-state storage sales is a thing for them. There's no way in the world they're going, oh, here's an Xbox Series S version. They could literally probably drop gigabytes, tens of gigabytes off the size if they just went, here's one texture set for Series S, here's one texture set for Series X. But they won't do that. They make some money, but just waste your drive space. But the fact that the PC has a massively larger texture set, or a massively larger install size, and I don't think it's because they're going, oh, here's another texture set for 1080 gamers. No. So gamers on PC, by default, don't run the ultra textures. I've been saying this for a little while now, actually, that the ultra textures in modern games that actually look like they're designed to bog video RAM requirements down on cards, so NVIDIA can sell better cards and Microsoft can claim Xboxes are equal parity to PC. I really feel that top-end texture set is more about color fidelity, right? So if you're not running a 10-bit panel and high dynamic range, you're not sort of running that double color gamut that our eyes can kind of make use of. You might not need the absolute top-end texture set, which might not gain a lot in resolution. It might just be, as I say, color fidelity, which ups the size of the texture file massively. So probably dropping that down 2 steps on PC might be a pretty intelligent thing to do, and I bet you the textures still look pretty damn good. But yeah, PC textures. I'm a little bit worried about the size. I've already alluded that PC textures, one large file, can be used to bog down frame rates and load up CPUs to affect minimum frame rate. I think that quite seriously is going to be huge. But look, Microsoft need the gamers on console, right? Those 3 pillars, don't forget, I'm being legitimately serious. They really, really, really do not want this game to be good on PC, right? They just don't. They need it to sell on PC. They're selling it for a lot of money. Well, don't get me wrong, they want the sales. They've got to recoup a lot of money, but I don't think I think it is going to be a nightmare on PC for very legitimate reasons. All right. Now, I've I'm skipping a lot of my notes here because they're to do with gameplay. I'm going to come back now and cover aspects about the game that aren't technical in nature. I'm just trying to, again, I didn't make my notes part of this video. So I do say thank you to anyone who's still here with me. You're probably foaming at the mouth and seething. It's probably Hank Banger that's motivating you to hang by me. No, please, you're on the wrong channel. Oh man, I'm all about the laugh. Seriously, if we can't look at ourselves and laugh, man, life's too hard. Nobody gets out alive. All right. So, okay, it looks like the last part of my notes were all purely about gameplay. With the exception, I'm just saying that the PC will probably be patched around 3 months plus in. Right? A lot of people can take a Games Pass sub for up to 3 months. They probably will want, they don't want games to do a one and done playthrough. So while it's janky for those first couple of months, ideally the game then gets good at the point where people's little 3 months free Game Pass subscriptions runs out, that people then actually have to either buy the game once the reviews start going up saying, oh, it's good now, or yeah, I'll try another Games Pass subscription. I don't know. You know, maybe at the 3 months mark of the game coming out, they'll offer a discount on annual subscriptions just to convince people. Yeah, persevere, stick with us. We're still working on getting the PC version good. But yeah, okay. So that's the technical side of things. What has Bethesda possibly done when targeting all their, the easy argument from them will be, oh yeah, we just wanted to really polish the Xbox side of the coin, and we can see that a lot of the Microsoft developers, I'm Ellinisted to bits, and I like watching my preview videos of the people who get access to development code or the pre-release stuff. And you can just about see across all the Microsoft titles for the last couple of years that the Xbox Series S version of the software, the early stages of software development, is generally the more polished software. Now, I have been in software development. I've been in the art teams and trying to minimize the number of polygons on items to up performance. I understand you optimize for the weakest platform, right? So again, counter argument to that, I'll be a fencer. I don't want a bias or a leading tone by these to imply that these things are as evil as I make them out to be, right? I think there's legitimate reasons why Xbox Series S is the lead platform, possibly simply just by sales, right? It has always been Microsoft's strategy. When they lost the wars in the early stage, before the consoles came to market, there was some Halo footage that went out there, and this is not the video to talk about this, but it's 30 seconds or less, is a recap. The Halo footage came out, it was janky, it wrecked everybody's expectations that the Xbox specs that were pretending to be 20% more powerful than a PlayStation, everyone was like, oh, I'm just going to buy an Xbox. And then the Halo footage came out, and everyone just, overnight, Amazon was bombarded with interest all of a sudden in the PlayStation console. And the people who give market research and speculation realised that consumers overnight had flipped over into the PlayStation camp. And some exec at Microsoft just went to the decision. They went to fabrication partners, and they said, they basically took the attitude of, okay, we're just going to pull in a Nintendo Wii, which is be the cheapest console on the market and just outsell everybody, right? It doesn't matter if it's by performance, it's no good. At Christmas time, when parents can see a console for a couple $100 that, gets their family out of trouble, right? That's what the purchaser in their household will buy, right? And the other purchaser in their household is the Call of Duty father that buys the hardware they want for Call of Duty, and then, everyone else in the house on that ecosystem, who cares, right? Microsoft's strategy for buying Activision was very targeted for Call of Duty. They knew that the adult gamer with the cash who buys the console for the family is the person who buys, for COD. So, Microsoft no marketing, Microsoft no business, right? Stuff they've got down to a fine art. So the Xbox Series S was conceived overnight, and it wasn't designed cleverly by someone like Cerny, who goes to industry partners like Epic and go, oh, you're working on Unreal Engine 5. What do you need? Oh, feedback physics needs tighter caches on the APU. Yep, we'll do that. Okay. Oh, what else do you need? Oh, this. Okay. We'll change the chip to make the software great, right? That's why Sony have always customized hardware. Microsoft don't really customize hardware, but when the Series S was designed basically overnight, was because Microsoft went to their fabrication partners and said, look, give us a series of specs that you can make super cheap at the next fabrication shrink. And so 8 gig of RAM, you know, like a neat multiple of 8 gigabytes of RAM was going to change the bus feed out from the chip in meaningful ways that allowed the shrinking of the board. Basically, overnight, they just went, okay, here's the Xbox Series S specs. But remember, the brief that went to that design partner was so that at the next fabrication shrink, we can make a new console cheap. Now, generally what happens with a fabrication shrink is the chip consumes less heat for the same power output, for the same computational output. And therefore, the Series S version 2 is going to get a speed bump, right? Now, we know that they've pulled down the concept of an Xbox Series X replacement because developers have been pushing back going, like, FU, too many SKUs. We are not going to support this much hardware. Basically, the so-called development tools everyone was waiting for, that was just to auto-output a line of code across 7 different SKUs, right? They're not for optimization. They're just to allow software to be sold, right? So, you can argue it's for optimization. At a technical level, it is. If something's working, I'd argue that's optimized. If something's not working. So Series S version 2, where's that? I expect it for Christmas time, probably. I don't know. Hell, I could imagine that there's Starfield packages of that right now. The industry's best secret, just about to be pushed out. But basically, it'll come ready for Christmas. If it's not this year, it'll probably be next year. Or it'll be one of the other crucial. I think in other parts of the world, that end of March is another crucial video game sales area. So it might be America. I think your big holidays are in the middle of the year. I don't know. I only know my culture. I got blinkers. I've experienced my life. But from sales points of view, there's a couple of key seasons each year, and it might be that Microsoft has the Xbox Series S version 2 lined up. But needless to say, developers have been optimizing for Series S as the primary platform for quite a while now. And I forget where I was going with that. I haven't got my note reference up on the screen. For why that was all relevant. Too many coffees. Yeah, I stopped drinking coffee for a couple of months there. I get up early, see my partner off to work. I'm making coffees in the morning. Months of making coffees at 5 a.m. Not drinking them myself. Recently, the weakness struck me. I was like, I'm going to drink coffee again. I'm a much better chewy user drinking the coffee. Thank you, anyone here with me. Look, I hope there's been some insights here. Look, I'm going to scroll back through my notes now because this is the super short part of it. This is the part where I'm passionate. Right? This is the part where you, the gamers, can see I love role-playing games. I've actually generally really liked Bethesda games. And I have genuine concerns for the software. Now, not least of which, here's a smooth transition, it's still a little bit technical, but I want to talk about gameplay in a second. Right? So the Fable team, working on Fable, has been proclaiming how difficult it's been to shoehorn a slow-moving role-playing game with heavy dialogue trees into the Forza engine. Right? Now, again, the Forza engine, designed by 1010, is super optimized for the hardware that's running on. So that makes logical reasons why they've used the Forza engine. It's an open-world gaming engine. But it was designed for high-speed traversal over large viewports, over large view distances. Not what a slow-paced walking simulator, medieval walking simulator, is going to be. And the Fable development team, there's people who've been working on that project now for so long, and have just said, the reason I quit is I didn't want to work in the games industry for 30 years and only put out 3 products. Right? I want to have my name associated with just more than just one title that may or may not fail. And in their little grievances on the way out the door, they're basically burning the engine, saying, look, shoehorning, this is not a good match. Okay, so what have we got for Starfield? We're using the engine, the creation engine they were using for Morrowind. Now, Morrowind, as an engine, that was running on an Xbox, which was a 700 megahertz, 733, I think the final build, processor, standard x86 or CISC architecture, 700 megahertz, single core, small amount of RAM, but it was designed, you can argue with smaller grids in it. And so by changing your U grids, you can open up more of the world. I've always found that even PCs with 32 gig or 64 gig of RAM and Ninja processors, once you go above about U grids 13, Might be 11. Look, you've got to understand the diamond as it builds out. You've got to use certain numbers because they're a little bit more stable. I don't know if it's 11, 13 or 15, but one of those proved to be more stable. And basically, once you go past UGrid 7, it gets a bit chunky, but UGrid 11, I think, is about as sizable as you can get without a slightly less stable build. And UGrids are just the number of zones around you that are in active space. And the more you open up your UGrids, the more you break the game. If you run OpenCities mod in one of those games like Skyrim, if you open your UGrids up a lot, what will happen? Story elements that are meant to be unfolding as you walk into a zone, right? They happened when that zone was like a speck on the horizon. And then you finally walk up there and there's just a couple of dead bodies on the ground and you didn't see it. Now, it's not entirely true. Like the one in Markarth, the crime that happens in Markarth as you go through the gate into Markarth. Sorry for a spoiler there. Should have said spoiler alert. That's obviously tied to that gate opening. They've gone out of their way to make sure that a dependency is in place to ensure that happens every time, because it's crucial to the story. But if the developers themselves don't go out of their way for that, the UGrids edits that we, the users, would make to our initialization files when the game started to increase the fidelity and the screen beyond what the engine itself was doing by default. These tweaks, we know that they can exist. We know that the Morrowind engine, or creation engine, can be taken to higher levels. But Starfield is a different beast. It needs vehicles. It needs to transition through orbits. Now, you can do that through loading screens. You can just put a transition where there's clouds in the way. It's like the old elevator between loading zones and instance worlds. Essentially, they make planets instanced, leaving the planet instanced. The loading screen is cleverly hidden by a nice little graphical effect that looks like there's atmosphere blocking your view. You can use pre-rendered scenes for the transition going up, arguably. If there's a moment where the controls are robbed from you on the ship because arguably your thrusters are 100%, you just have to hold a particular trajectory. There's ways of suspension of disbelief. They can get around that. So is the Morrowind engine necessarily going to hold it back? Not necessarily. And it's arguably a good thing that the id Software team, ID Software, came in. I mean, these guys, you've only got to look at like any id Software game. They've always pushed the limits, right? When Xbox One realised they could get a little bit more frame rate if they dropped the colour fidelity down to, this is what I was saying before about textures. If they dropped to a lower bit rate of colour, you could squeeze out a little bit higher frame rate. And we quite often found that the id Engine games were running at the higher colour fidelity, right? Wolfenstein and Rage and whatnot. They look really good, and there's a reason to that. So id Software, I mean, these are the guys that do ray tracing titles at hundreds of frames a second. You could run Doom Eternal at 1,000 frames a second on a good PC. So those guys coming in, there could have been a few things they were doing in terms of optimization. I don't know what they'd be able to do at a software level. And I personally really hope that they weren't in there for a software level, because what I'm about to talk about is actually way more important. And it's a little thing called gameplay balance. Right? It's a little thing called, well, especially when it comes down to gameplay fun. You've got to have a hook where people enjoy a game. Now, when I play a game, I set the game difficulty to hard by default. Right? The PlayStation 5, I think, there's even a setting where you can actually preset on your console what settings you want games to use by default. All right? I can go in there and I can say, look, don't even run the game at normal. Don't force me every time I start a game for the first time to go into options and say I want graphics fidelity and hard. Right? I don't think many games are using that. I'm not trying to upset PlayStation there, but I'm just trying to say that for someone like myself who likes games hard, it's the reason why I love the Outer Worlds. It's fantastic. The AI, I'll just redo a fight over and over and over again. It's like Killzone Mercenary on a PS Vita, right? You just redo the fights over and over and over again. See what the AI is going to do, right? Good AI makes you want to play a game. And every time I die in this game, I just grin from ear to ear. My partner's watching me. It's like, yeah, I'm loving this game, right? And it's because the AI is so good. It's because the challenge is so good. Now, Bethesda aren't known for presenting challenge. I mean, Skyrim, sorry, there's like 3 fights in the entire game that I actually give a shit about. And sadly, Skyrim just down-tunes my game the way I play games, right? If I'm going to go play a competitive online shooter, I turn on Ziggurat, a single-player offline shooter, and play a couple of rounds before I go online. It primes me, ready to play. But when I play games like Skyrim for hours and hours and hours on end, I don't get tricky with my combat. I don't take level ups. I sit there and I get my character as much. You kind of got to take level ups for the enemy scale. But I do things where I don't take my perk points when leveling up, and I do things so that I actually self-gimp my character to make things more difficult for me. I mean, the game I'm playing right now, I took a perk point last night. I did 25% more damage. First one offered to me in the game. It's probably the stupidest one to ever take. I know it's going to make the game more difficult for me. I know I'm not upgrading to the better weapons for a reason, because I want the challenge. I like the challenge. And I'm playing on hard. But I don't think Bethesda, who are not the masters of all things for all people, who have gotten increased software sales the more they dumb down their games for it to be accepted by a wider audience. They certainly have. RPGs used to be a niche gaming product. 5% of the game market, at best, would buy into RPGs. You look at that. Every time an RPG came out, by sales, even if it was really good, you could see how much of the market it captivated, right? Role-playing games were not highly sought after. It all changed when Diablo came out, right? And so hardcore RPG nuts like myself refer to that as an action role-playing game. Kind of not really a role-playing game, you could argue. But, it's a loose definition. What is role-playing? So, role-playing, as it became more consumer-friendly, right, there's more sales in your role-playing game product. It's a buzzword now. You've got to put RPG elements in your description of what game you're selling, because consumers apparently want depth in the games they're playing, and apparently RPG elements means that. So, right, you look at the conversation tree in Oblivion. It was really fun. I liked the way conversations happen in Oblivion. I actually think they're going to be doing that again in Starfield. I really do. I think that's going to be back. If not, it's the new Elder Scrolls. But I have heard that Todd Howard or various elements of the team talk, like, yeah, that might be coming back. It's like, yes! But you look up to level ups in Oblivion. It had the most compellingly addictive level up system of any game of many RPGs I've played in a long time. I mean, this game I'm playing now, Outer Worlds, is very much that times 10. I love it. It's so compellingly addictive. Just want to restart and try a different build. Even if the story's the same, the game's a completely different experience because there's such diversity and variety in the builds that you can do into the game and how you can play it. But, sorry, I've just distracted. So I've got two cats, housing a cat and my cat, and they're not getting on very well. Empathy for other living entities means I have to give them focus. Please, Gustav, play nice. Yes, sweetie, play nice. Gigi. Good. So, gameplay and being tight, right? So, Bethesda, when they made Skyrim, a lot of hardcore people who've been playing since Morrowind who saw the game get softened to be Oblivion and the increased sales success that brought, and then the game softened to be Skyrim, right? And I say softened, yes. The level ups in Oblivion, there were secondary skill sets and primary attributes, and the way one fed into the other and the way you could max out your character leveling up really made you go back and respec a character and change what things you made primary and what things you made secondary. And for example, if you could run or jump, increased your athletics, you might put that in your secondary skills on purpose so that you can, power level or whatever. Like, it was just methods. There were ways. If you started thinking outside the box, it gave layers of depth to the gameplay. So Skyrim, gone. But again, increased sales success. Right, and look at how many times they've resold Skyrim. I mean, I bought Oblivion multiple times. I bought Skyrim multiple times. It's not just Bethesda products. I bought the CD Projekt Reds multiple times. Going back to The Witcher 1. That software was so atrocious on launch. Oh my lord! They had to physically re-release those discs into an enhanced edition because there was such file fragmentation in the original install set that they were never going to get the load times down or deal with a lot of issues with text loading and stuff until they re-released that, right? I know CD Projekt Red. Anyone just disappointed that Cyberpunk wasn't great on launch? I'm like, man, I've been buying their products since the 90s. Like, yeah, it's just par for the course. In fact, it's probably par for the course when a project gets even bigger and bigger and it goes down. This happens. But, as I say, that every single CD Projekt Red title I bought on launch, I then would rebuy the enhanced edition when it came out because it would fix the huge issues that would therein happen. So yeah, look, I don't mind buying Skyrim multiple times. I mean, I bought it twice on launch day for Xbox and PC. Same with Oblivion, Xbox and PC on launch day. Collector's editions. I have a couple of physical Septim coins because each one of them came with a Septim. Yeah, they're great. But yeah, to being all things to all people to get increased sales, you've got to remember there's so much requiring Starfield sell incredibly well. They need it. So it needs to be all things to all people. The original design brief before anyone announced Starfield as a project was that Bethesda had said our next product, that's before Starfield was announced, our next product is going to tie together the worlds of the Elder Scrolls series and the Fallout series. Basically, if we're going to spend this long per game release, in between game releases, we need the product to be able to sell for a larger amount of time. It's the exact opposite of what Microsoft was doing with Office and getting you to buy an Office 365 subscription so you get it annually, right? Good software companies are actually want to put out a software title and be able to support it, and therefore fix it and have a modding community. And Bethesda know they thrive by the basis of their modding community, and so they need products with longer lifetime, and they didn't want to stratify their modding community between medieval product and a futuristic product. I saw that happen. I saw all the modders leave the Skyrim community when Fallout came out. It was the newest product that pushed their PCs a bit harder, and so all the PC modders went over there. And when the Skyrim Anniversary Edition came out, basically no one went back and fixed their mods to be compatible, sadly, because they'd moved on. And it's just like, no, stratifying your products isn't good. Bethesda knew this, so they were going to tie them together. So this is the most homogenised, be all things to all people product that could ever be written from a company that can't even do complex combat with good AI, right? So do I hope that Bethesda's tweaking of their product is to make gunplay battles fun? Absolutely. Hopefully it's for some really good AI that they've lifted straight from any other Doom game or whatever. And if they've done that, yeah, this game is going to be so cool. He's hoping. But all things to all people. And I promise you it won't have a difficulty that makes it interesting for me. And people talk about, you can get arrested, you can pay your crimes and stuff. I mean, anyone who's seen that mechanic play out in Oblivion or Skyrim knows how shallow it is. Okay, your skills might atrophy if you're in prison for a long time. You might lose a point or two. That's RPGing, isn't it? That's a sense of immersion, role-playing. But, yeah, I'm really worried for gameplay balance. I don't think there's going to be much in the way of gameplay balance. I've never seen Skyrim do that. Certainly with regards to economy, it doesn't take long before you've maxed out the game, and before Half-Fire launched, and you could spend money on houses, right? I've always just made potions to pay off my first house in Skyrim. Now you can say that's a bit meta, thinking outside the box, and because you've played the game a few times, you're using knowledge that you've acquired from previous pass-throughs. This is equivalent to table talk in an actual role-playing game circle. So, but no, Bethesda and economy, no, the balance in this game. Procedural generation. Oh my God, trying to get game balance in any game with some form of procedural generation in it. Look, I don't even want to talk about that. Look, tangenting, and I haven't got the note here, but procedural generation, right? If you rely on modders, and modders need things to be in specific grid coordinates in a known map, right? It's going to limit the scope of what modders can do. Now, I don't think that's the truth. I think Bethesda will come up with the concept that there's core worlds that are static. There's, I don't know anything about the procedural. To be honest, I've read so little about Starfield because I really want to enjoy it and not know anything about it going in. But yeah, very concerned about the Morrowind engine being used for this game. We've got vehicles in this game. Morrowind, if you got a Stilt Strider, or whatever they were called, I think that might be the name. Was that Dark Crystal? Stilt Strider, that's Morrowind. It was a loading screen. You didn't really get to experience the Stilt Strider. I mean, you kind of were, I guess, arguably. You got to see outside from an advantage perspective, maybe. Maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe I dreamed it. The land of mushrooms. That's a good dream. Oh dear. Look, I've got some gameplay notes. I've got to scroll back up to them. I've just got to find them. Because the gameplay is what it really, for me, is all about. It's got the gameplay. It doesn't matter what the graphics look like. It doesn't matter if it's 30 frames a second, if it's stable 30 frames a second with no frame rate change. But seriously, if you don't believe that I believe that 30 frames a second gaming is acceptable, I've got videos on my channel talking about how if there's no latency on the controller and there's no frame lag because you're using DLSS or FSR2 or frame generation that adds a latency, right? If you can make 30 frames a second brute force highly responsive, 30 frames a second gaming is fantastic. We could talk about temporal resolution, how you technically get more frame lines if you've got double the frame rate. And look, that might be a thing. A lot of people run consumer class TVs, have about 200 lines of motion resolution on 4K sets. I've got a girlfriend with a 720 set like an old 1280 by 720 res, high def as we called it. It has about 700 lines of motion resolution. My old plasma had 1080 lines of motion resolution. That means when I was playing Skyrim and I was walking down the road, it was pixel perfect every step of the way. But on just about everybody else's TVs, when I go to someone else's house and I haven't bought a high quality TV with north of 800 lines of motion resolution, what happens is you walk down the road and the screen's just blur, 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 and then as soon as you let go of the joystick for your character movement, the game just turns into a photorealistic rendering of the world you're in. So, look, there are people out there that absolutely need 60 frames a second because it slightly ups their motion resolution, right? I get that. There are people out there that will never, and I was gaming at 200 frames a second in the 90s. If you don't think that I'm a pro gamer who enjoys high frame rate gaming, yeah, I love high frame rate gaming, but I'm also willing to game at 30 frames a second if I just want a game to be stunningly beautiful. And so do I think Microsoft did the right thing tuning Starfield, which is a game we want epic beauty in, and Bethesda who are known for crap combat, and you don't need 60 frames a second for improved combat, right? Like, okay, yes, there's guns in this game, but typically animation, the animation delay and lag for swinging a sword or whatever in combat in a game like Skyrim is such that, and it's not a competitive shooter, you don't need the 3 frames heads up over your mate to know where their location is on the screen so you can shoot them in the head. You don't need, even fighting games, high frame rate means you're telegraphing, you can see when a punch is going to come, you know where to block, right? There's advantages for high frame rate gaming in some genres, but a lot of genres, especially where they're immersive story games where you just want graphical fidelity to sell the suspension of disbelief, a lower frame rate with twice the visual fidelity is the way to go. But, I mean, that's a can of worms or a hornet's nest. I don't want to bet that, just get downvoted. I say 99% incredible shit everyone agrees with. I'd say one thing that people disagree with. I never get upvoted. My rants are too long, right? No human being will align. They don't want to back someone saying a statement they disagree with, right? Again, if I said 99% truth and 1% potential fallacy that you disagree with, right? You're never going to upvote me. I understand that. I'm not here for the votes. But, I got a bit sidetracked there. Physics tied to the frame rate. Oh, that's the concern. Look, I'm just reading my notes again. There was a whole bunch of gameplay stuff I'm deeply concerned about. But what I'll do, in the interest of respecting your time, perhaps I should let us hang up now. I don't want to fatigue you. I don't want you to think, I'll just avoid videos by this guy forevermore because my videos appear to be directionless. They're not directionless. This is a rant and a rave. It is about Starfield. It is a game I'm highly passionate about. I absolutely want to support developers who make great games. I really want them to have a happy time making those games. I want developers to live in a consumer ethically ecosystem where they can make games without corporate decisions getting in the way of hurting the pundits, hurting the people that are actually paying the money, are actually paying for it. Let's hope it has an iota of gameplay balance, because pulling that stuff in down the track leads to low review scores, right? If you've got one gamer out there that loves the economy being broken and then being just super overpowered, and then you put out a patch that corrects that, they will downmark you, right? We saw what happened with Sony with the new Gran Turismo 7 when they stuffed up the game world balance with regarding to economy. They had to modify it, and then they made the worst decision ever. They just gave 1 million in-game credits to anyone who'd logged in at the start. And so myself, I didn't mind them modifying the game for tighter economy, but they burnt me, the person who wasn't burnt by the tighter economy, by giving me 1 million credits. And you can say, well, I didn't have to take those 1 million credits. Yep, I did not have to take those 1 million credits. You are completely correct. But when you're slogging hard, spending time earning little nuances of things at 5,000 credits a pop, or small increments, just setting a difficulty for yourself, just setting this slog for yourself when you know you can click one button and make that slog go away and go and buy all the Ferraris in the world you want to buy, is, you've got to get that balance right out the door. But to my eye, Bethesda have really never done that, right? The gameplay loop in most of the Bethesda games I play, the challenge is at the start of the game, and after you get a little way in, it drops right off. Now, if they want people to be playing a game scaled across an epic universe where people commit to their one save game over a large amount of time because they want to, have all 20 relationship arcs and close down all the story arcs and see all the various endings and dialogue trees, then you've got to have that balance over a prolonged amount of time. Anyway, I just did what I said I wasn't going to do, which is linger when I was on the way out the door. I want to finish strong. I want to finish with a strong tone of voice in my voice. I want you to feel positive about your day. The fact that if I'm not even related to this product and I can feel and think this way, if you don't think that the Bethesda developers haven't thought about the issues that I've just brought up, I guarantee you they have. There's a good chance they've all been redressed. Right? There's a good chance that everything I've just said in a video almost as long as a Christopher Nolan flick is, I could probably have another hour. Let's talk technicalities of Starfield, shall we? Oh my Lord. Yeah, look, I really say thank you for your time being here. If you've stumbled across my channel because I've got a heading which is flavour of the moment on the net, then look, pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Thank you for meeting me. Look, my channel primarily exists at this moment for making Hogwarts screensavers because doing that has gotten more people watching my channel. I've got some political concepts I've been trying to sell to government and whatnot for quite a while. How to save the planet type thing. They were all the videos I was doing last year. I kind of got motivated when strife was kind of cropping up all around the world. I got a child. I'm like, what have I done to my child? You know, at some point your kid's going to walk up to you and say, you had a chance to say to the world, what did you do? Right? If you do nothing, then you're going to have to look in their eye and say, well, you haven't got anything to say, have you? So am I being a veteran or am I going and fighting here a war with regards to software? No, it's entertainment. It's probably the least valuable thing to the human race possible. But life's hard. We play games to feel good. And we want games to make us feel good. We want no issues with regards to these things. And so I talk about this as it's a happy topic. Oh, cats, I've shut you out. Yeah, look, I'm going to have to open my window here so that the cats find a secret stage left exit. There you go. And look, sorry for that extra noise at the end of my video. Look, anyway, pleasure to meet you. I don't make it a one-way conversation. I've got some notes or some comments here. If you want me to redress particular points that I might have inferred but haven't gone deep enough, don't make it to create an argument that you've practiced and you just want to win. If you just want to tell me something that you've been sprouting out all around the net, or if you think I'm one of these people who's just going to jump on and give the game a 0 review score or something, like I'm a fanboy or something, no, I'm not. I'm passionate. Positivity. I just want us all to thrive. I'll probably do some tweaking and some tuning videos to start with. If it turns out the gate it's a bit of a nightmare, just like I got people up and running on Forza for months, and Kingdom Come Deliverance and various things. I'm that guy that just veterans in the forums just try to help people get their stuff up and running, right? And I'm willing to do that for you. There's some comments. If you've spent this long listening to me, let me reward you or pay you back, if you will, tit for tat. I'm willing to give you more time. So leave a comment, leave a question, if you will, and we can engage that way. And that way, when I say thank you for your time, I am being genuine. I really am thankful for your time. I'm happy for our engagement together. And we are a community. And together we stand taller. If we unify, we actually have power. And I'm not trying to get a union together here or anything. I just want a game that works well across a range of platforms. So I'm sure you do too. That's probably why you've come here to watch this video. It is filled with positivity. If you read between the lines, if you actually read the universe of everything I'm saying, I'm talking here about a highly polished, highly professional product made by many of the world's best people who, by value, are worth so much. Look at how much money Microsoft had to spend to acquire them. Right? If you read everything I'm saying between the lines, I acknowledge all these incredible things. Right? Gaming industry is amazing. It's growing. It's getting bigger. But this is one of those little step moments which really matter. Right? This is the make or break moment for an Xbox console ecosystem. Absolutely promise you that. This game is worth everything. So if you want to see how underhanded the media and everything becomes, right, the whole American economy is tied to Microsoft as a console surviving, right? There's a reason why there's some really weird stuff going on in the console war for the first time ever. And we actually are having a console war for the first time ever because it saves us having physical wars around the planet. Right, in the 80s, yeah, I'm a Sega user, you're a Nintendo user. Oh, you know, it was equivalent to, I'm in Australia, you know, oh, your dad drives Ford, my dad drives Holden, you know, like, it's just one of those school things, you know, like, oh, I support this football team, you support that football team. Yeah. Console wars, you know, yeah, it's always been a thing of kids, up until this generation, right? Because now it's gotten to the point of such big business that all the companies are being bought up, all the games are being deprecated, right? This is business warfare at the highest level. There's so much money tied into it. This is for the first time ever, consumer ethics matter, right? Supporting platforms that support consumers actually matters, right? We have to vote with our wallets. So, quite honest, the initial build of Starfield I'll probably be playing for my first time ever at a go on Games Pass. Look forward to playing Hi-Fi Rush as well. Yeah. And then, you know, if it isn't janky, if it is a polished version on PC and it doesn't look like they're going to yank that away from us, I might wait for that first sale and then buy it. Yeah, I'd like to think I buy it on day one. You know, might go down there and put a pre-order down. Yeah, no, probably not. Alrighty. Anyway, much joy with you and yours. And again, thank you for our time here together today. I look forward to maybe sharing some more with you down the track. Until then, you be well.